Welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews and to another reading vlog here on the channel. Today we have an exciting start to a 3-week project. I think you're probably watching this about 4 or 5 weeks after I've started it. Today it is the 15th of November and I am starting my reread slash full read through of the Greenbone Saga, starting with Jade City by Fonda Lee. Jade War will be next and Jade Legacy is out very soon, so I thought I would get started on these. I do have a digital review copy of the third one that I'm very excited for. I'm going to do what I've done for various other series here on this channel, and I'm going to do some check-ins every time I've read a bit of each of these, and we're going to have a wonderful time. Spoiler-ish warning, I suppose, for I'm going to be talking about all 3 books. I'm not going to get into intense spoilers for book 3, but we will probably talk about books 1 and 2. So if you don't want to have any spoilers or anything, you just want to know my full thoughts on the series, you can probably skip to the end. Hopefully future me will have done a little bit of a summary. I don't know. I'll put a skip in the description. I should probably also do some disclaimers before we start, because as far as I know, I have had review copies for every single book in this series. I might not have had one for Jade City. I might have bought this myself. Doesn't matter. Nobody's paying me to talk about books and all opinions are my own. So I've started this project by reading 2 pages yesterday, which was deeply successful. I was very, very tired, but I am really excited to get to this week. I think I'm going to try and read kind of half and then another half. I'm off today. I might be able to get a lot of reading done. I don't know. I've also got to read Bone Shard Emperor, Mayday, and Animorphs 27 this week. So I was about to say today, that would be an intense day. No, this week. So there's a lot going on. We'll see how far we get. I thought I would start by reading you the blurb, just in case this is a video you're watching and you've got no idea what I'm talking about. And then I will sign off and we'll get started on reading. Jade is the lifeblood of the city of Janloon, a stone that enhances a warrior's natural strength and speed. It is mined, traded, stolen and killed for, all controlled by 2 families equal in their power and ruthlessness. When a modern drug emerges that allows anyone, even foreigners, to wield Jade, simmering tension between the 2 clans erupts into open war. Oh, I'm excited. I haven't reread these since... I don't think I did a reread of Jade City when Jade War came out. I feel like I might have done, but I honestly cannot remember. It will be in living memory. I've done it since being on this channel. But I'm excited to delve back into it. So I can't remember much of what happens, but my typical thing with rereads like this is I read them and gradually my brain remembers what was happening, and then I'll usually remember terrible things that happen maybe a second before they actually do, and I get sad. It's going to be a great time. I'm excited to kick off with it. I shall see you when I'm halfway through Jade City. Or maybe at the end. I don't know when I'm going to check in.
When I'm reading lots of books at the same time, it is either a sign that my mental health is doing fantastic or doing not great, and I'll let you guess which one we're going through at the moment. I'm back at work after a weekend away and just like... So I'm reading a whole bunch of stuff at the moment. Let me just go through what I'm reading because it's interesting. I'm reading Tagana, Jade City, Mayday, and Bone Shard Emperor. All things I'm really excited to be reading. All things that I'm like, what, I can't read another page at all? Everything, no. But we're powering through. I am 274 pages through Jade City. I've just reached the start of the 2nd interlude for those who might be, I don't know, reading along. Don't know why you would be doing that, but you might be. At this juncture, I think what I will start by saying is if you are just picking this up and you happen to be watching a reading vlog of all 3 first, I don't know why you would be doing that, but if you are, power through. It's a slower start than I remembered, and it's not that the start doesn't have loads of action in, because it absolutely does. Action packed, but it takes a while for the book to really settle in, and I think for you to work out who you need to be following and why, and it's got kind of a lot of... we're going to give you the other side of the story, but until you know that that's the other side of the story, it's a little bit hard to follow. But yeah, power through, because I'm at the point now where I'm just like, oh yes, this is what I want. And some major stuff goes down in the middle of this book. It's very, very exciting. Stuff that I don't think you would be expecting to happen. And those who have read this will know the thing that I mean that happens near the centre of this book. It's very dramatic. I'm amazed by how quickly you really fall for these characters who arguably aren't that great. And it's also that joy of rereading where you in the future have come to care about characters who maybe in this book you're like, oh, I don't know about you. Also, just a side note, I thought one of the characters was much younger than they were. I'd definitely been reading them as a child in the 2nd book, which is why I was a bit confused by some things that happen. They're not a child, they're 18. I'm so glad I'm a rereader now. I'm so profoundly glad, because I would be confused about that for the rest of my life if I'd not checked. But yeah, I'm having a good time. I'm hoping to finish this maybe this evening, maybe tomorrow. Haven't quite decided. As I say, I've got quite a lot of other things happening. I'm very much enjoying this reading experience, and I will be back to talk about the end very soon. Hello, it is Wednesday the 17th of November. I look like a mad scientist and I finished Jade City. Woo! Woo! Start by saying, had a wonderful time rereading this. Thought it was great. Had forgotten a lot more than I thought I had, / had amalgamated a lot of book 1 and 2 that I hadn't necessarily done correctly, but it was a hugely enjoyable reading experience. I was trying to think, like, what makes these books special, or what makes them a series that I, like, really want to recommend. Like, what would I be saying if this were a proper review video? And I don't really know. Beyond what I've already talked about, like, making you care about characters who you arguably in any other work of fiction would be the bad guys, you know. I find it really fascinating, and I'm really excited to delve into that in book 2. I do think it's the characters who really make it, because, like, substitute Jade for anything else that gives you superpowers, you know. This could be a completely different story, but these characters still make it work. Yeah, I'm really excited to delve into Jade War. I haven't quite decided when I'm going to pick that up. According to my schedule, it should be next week, but I'm like a tiny bit ahead on this week's schedule, so we might be able to make it work. I should probably be sensible and not do that, though. I can't remember if I talked about the book mail that I got already. Did I talk about the book mail? I got a review copy of Scorpica, very exciting. Full of treachery, sex, magic, and ruthless women. I mean, it's like my uni days. I'm kidding, it really isn't like my uni days. And The Weight of Feathers, which is for a project for next year. Exciting. I suppose in my most recent reading vlog, the Girls of Paper and Fire reading vlog, I talked a lot about trilogies, and specifically YA trilogies. And I was trying to think if there were similar things with adult fantasy trilogies. And I do think there is still this idea of kind of like the second book being a little bit slumpy, but I think it's less so in adult fantasy. I don't know why. I've encountered it less is probably a better way of describing that. We'll see how I feel about Jade War when I've read it. This is only my second time ever reading this. Can I remember anything that happens? Absolutely not. I remember one thing. I have one vague memory of a thing that happens, but honestly that could be a dream. It could be anything. Let's find out together. I'm going to pick this up next week. I will see you when I've made a start on Jade War. Hello, it is the 25th of November. I can't remember when I last checked in, but it was when I finished Jade City. There's a packet of freeze-dried strawberries acting as a bookmark in my copy of Jade War. Sorry, the camera's up really high today. I'm filming some sewing stuff, so just don't worry about it. I'm halfway through. I am at chapter 30, just at the start of chapter 31, page 292, and I have another 31 chapters or so to go. 30 and an epilogue, maybe, I'm not sure. It's hard to talk about Jade War without just reiterating what I said about Jade City, because I do think that they are very similar books, except for the fact that I think this is quicker to get into, probably because we already know who all the characters are and where their allegiances lie, and we don't have to think too hard about getting to know people. That's the word I'm looking for. Not a criticism of Jade City necessarily, more just sort of like a thing that has to happen in series with a lot of characters that you have to meet and understand quite quickly. The first book is going to be a little bit slower to start. There has been a bit of a time jump between the two books, as you will know if you've read it, and I actually really like that. I think going in straight after the end of the book would be a bit meh. We need a little bit of time for these characters to have settled into where they are now so that we can subvert their normal again. And actually, most of this first half of the book, thinking about it, with the exception of a few events, has really been a lot of immediate problem solving. So not so much, an army has arrived at our doorstep, or everything has exploded and now we need to deal with it. A nuclear bomb has hit. It's none of that stuff. It's more, these are the everyday problems that come up because of who we are in this society. And I think that's really interesting, with the exception of a few characters whose lives have been a bit more upended. Which is one of the reasons I think this series really works, is it gives you a lot of time to sort of see what the very bizarre everyday life, but it is everyday life, is like for these characters, and you really get a sense of how they feel about it. You're not just seeing them in extreme situations, although you are, because every situation they're in is extreme. It's very interesting. To talk more specifically, I really love Hilo as a character and his journey across these two books. I'll be very interested to see what goes on in book 3 just generally, but I really like that you get him, and a lot of in a lot of other books this character would be either completely flat or way too complicated, and you'd be like, okay, I don't really understand why you're doing what you're doing. Whereas Hilo, I feel like, partly because we get to see inside his head and partly because you see him from so many different perspectives, you really get who he is and why he's making the decisions he's made. And I think that's why he's such a compelling character, even though
as I've said in earlier, I think, in another book, he would be the villain. It's so fascinating. And yeah, I'm really, really enjoying it. I like Andon's plotline in this book. I'd forgotten a lot of everything that happened, so I'm just having a great time. Just having a great time reading it. I'll have more to say when I finished it, probably. I say that. I don't know if I'm going to have more to say. I'll have something to say when I finished it, though. We've officially transitioned out of the part of the year where I start every vlog clip complaining that it's too warm, into the part of the year where I start every vlog clip complaining that it's too cold. Hi. It's the 29th of November and it's too cold. But I finished Jade War. Okay, confession. Actually finished it several days ago and then was busy this weekend. I had my brothers to visit, which was very, very nice. Went to see Encanto, which is just, oh, it's fantastic. Like, if you can go and see it, go and see it. It's a wonderful time. Like, exactly what I needed right now. Warmed me right up. Oh, lovely. And over the weekend I did get some book mail. Let me tell you about all of the book mail that I got over the weekend. And a bit of last week as well, maybe, because why not? And then I will talk about my thoughts on Jade War. I bought myself a copy of Judgment Day by J.C. Jaffrey. I'm reading this for Overbooked. I have already finished it. It's really, really good. If you want badass bisexual vampire detectives, I mean, yes. A signed and dedicated by one of the authors who is a personal friend. Copy of Once Upon a Winter, a folk and fairy tale anthology. I've read one of these because I got to read an early edition of A Happy Ever After by A.D. Hart, who is a dear friend. And I'm really excited to see what else is in here and discover some new indie authors because I don't read a lot of indie fiction. It's just something that I never really do. One of the most anticipated books of the year for me, Lies Not by M.A. Carrick. This is the sequel to, I have it on my shelf somewhere. I picked it up and now I can't find it. It's somewhere in the midst of time. Mask of Mirrors. I'm really, really excited to read this. This comes out in December and I have a reread planned and it's going to be wonderful. And Jade Legacy came. I can remember, this is tangential and I'm sorry, I can remember getting the review copy of Jade War and really feeling like, okay, now I've made it. Now, this is the level of arcs I wish to get. And it's not even an arc, it's a finished copy. But like, reading Jade War early felt like as close to fame as I will ever get. And so it's nice to be reliving that with Jade Legacy. Although it is a beefy boy at, I'm not reading the last page, I'm just reading the page numbers. 713 pages. I'm in for a treat this week. I haven't looked at what else I need to read. We'll look at that in a minute. But Jade War, I think it's a really great sequel, and here's why. I think it works because it doesn't hit second book slump, because this series has an overall arc. It will depend where this book ends to know where that arc went. But broadly speaking, there isn't really a beginning, middle and end, or there's not a obvious everything was going well for insert name here until this happened. It doesn't really work like that because it's more about here is this society that has this hugely historic way of living and the way of interacting, but in some ways is quite violent and it's interacting with the modern world and how do you keep power and how do you lose power and just sort of like here is a new problem for them to solve. Okay, that's the consequences of that problem, and here this is spun off into this. And really, sort of everything is the consequence of the first few things that have happened at the start of book one, and we're just sort of following it through. And I find that really interesting, and I think it helps avoid second book slump because you're not going, well, the plot of book one was really exciting, but book two's just trying to catch up with it, or is missing the wonderful part of the setting that bit was. And instead, what you have is book one was amazing, and book two follows on from that and is more of the same. So if you didn't like book one, you are unlikely to like book two, is a very important thing to note. It will not sit right with you. I suspect the same can be said for Jade Legacy. I'm just guessing. But yes, hugely wonderful. Do I think you should read this series if you were just basing on book one and two? Absolutely yes. I'm going to read you the blurb for book three so we can get excited. So, spoiler warning for book three. If you do not want to know anything about book three, you can skip ahead. I will put a timestamp below and I will do just like a full spoiler-free wrap-up of whether the entire trilogy is worth it at the end, okay? I believe it's a trilogy. If it's not a trilogy, this vlog's going to end very differently. Are they gone? Are they gone? Now, none of this is officially spoilers. This is the back cover blurb, but I know some people like to go in completely knowing nothing. Blood for the clan, magic for the world, anything for family. Jade, the magical substance once exclusive to the greenbone warriors of Kekon, is now coveted throughout the world. Everyone wants access to the supernatural abilities it provides, from governments to criminal kingpins. As the struggle over control of Jade grows ever larger and more deadly, the Cole family and the ancient ways of the Kekonese greenbones will never be the same. Jade Legacy is the explosive conclusion to the World Fantasy Award-winning Greenbone Saga. By the way, it could be Kekonese. I'm not sure. I've never seen it phonetically written down. So, interestingly, that could be the blurb of book one. So much has changed across this book, but the actual crux of the situation they find themselves in has not changed, and I find that fascinating. Like, this could be the blurb of all 3 books. How interesting. So I'm going to get started on that this week. Let me grab my laptop and see what else I've got on. I'm reading Jade Legacy. Very excited about it. Mask of Mirrors. I've given myself 2 quite chunky books to read this week, and I think it's this one? The second book in Josie Jeffrey's Sovereign series. Can you tell I'm preparing for the Josie Jeffrey section of Overbooked? Disclaimer, Josie is a personal friend. I'm reading those. I've got some filming to do. I've got some scripting to do. I've got to film Animorphs 27 for next week, which for you was last week. And yeah, it's all going to be fine. I'm not hugely busy in all other facets of life. It's okay. But I'm excited to get to Jade Legacy, and I will talk to you when I am. I don't think there's going to be like a neat part 2. But sometimes there are interludes, so I will endeavour to stop at an interlude. How many chapters are there? 63, so we will stop at 32 chapters, and I will speak to you then. Great. Perfect. Ciao. Hello, it is the 30th of November. We're very close to the end of the month. And I'm halfway through Jade Legacy. I say halfway. I think I'm just under halfway in terms of pages, maybe. But I am for those who want to know, I'm just at the start of chapter 33, Truth Bearers. I don't think I'm going to spoil anything in this section, but as ever, if you don't want to know about book 3, we'll skip to the end. I'm loving it. Let me start by saying, again, similar to Jade War, if you didn't like the previous books, nothing changes in this fact. And I think that's because of what I was saying about this really is sort of just a continuous narrative, which I find baffling. And so cool and so well written to not feel totally boring, especially in book 2. Like, I have no idea where the peak of this book is going to be, pun intended, because I've got no idea what the resolution is going to be, and it's so thrilling to read that way. I'm really enjoying it. One of the things that's really struck me on this read is how things that in another work or in another way of telling this exact same story would be the most enormous climax of the story. They would be huge. They would be, the happy scene that preludes to the end of the season or whatever in a TV show adaptation of this are so small, and it's so interesting, and I can't work out how I feel about it. So I can't think of a good example from earlier books, and I can't use one from this, but just that idea of a huge event in life being either happening outside of the pages of the book or just like a little mention and then they keep going with life. And I think it's so interesting looking at the priorities of the clan and what's important to them and how the clan life has so subsumed their lives that even these big happy events or these big sad events in some cases are tangential to this plot line about all the violence and stuff. There's been a lot of real sadness. There's been a lot of very mixed emotions. I think that's one thing that you can definitely say about this series. For instance, times where I've been like, I'm very happy that this thing is happening. This brings me joy. This specific thing. And if you told me that was what happened, I'd be like, oh, great. But reading it and knowing why it's happened, I'm kind of more going, oh, great. You know, those are my emotions. And as you can see, I'm finding it very difficult to make eye contact with the camera today. I don't know why. I would like to finish this today. I'm really hoping I can. I've got about another 30 chapters or so. I think I can because I'm having a great time with it. And I want to know what the ending is. And then I kind of want to reread it all again knowing the ending. I really shouldn't do that, but I would love to. Maybe I'll put a reread in for next year. That might be what I do. Anything else to say? Shay is still awesome. And probably... I think Shay is my favourite character to read because she's like the only one of 2 female characters in this. I think that Hilo is probably the most interesting character of all of them. Possibly. Just in terms of like delving into his motivations and his personality and stuff. I find very interesting. Anyway, I should probably get to work because it's nearly work time. Thank you for putting up with first thing in the morning in the winter lighting, and I will see you later. Hi, from later in the day. I will confess I've done a fair amount of reading of this in all of my breaks today, and I finished it. I finished Jade Legacy. I loved it. I will start by saying I thought it was absolutely fantastic. I'll be really interested to hear the thoughts of various different people. I'd be very interested in reading some Own Voices reviews from disabled reviewers. I think that would be really interesting. I will say I feel a bit like I've gone through an emotional blender. Like I feel so much... I don't even know if catharsis is the right word, but I feel like I've experienced every emotion in the reading of this whole series, and doing them back to back is 1,000% the way I recommend doing it because of all of the narrative structure stuff I've already talked about. My overwhelming feeling being directly at the end, like I finished this maybe an hour ago, is I just feel worn out in the best way. Like I don't think I've had that experience with a book or series probably since Call of the Bone Ships was a real, oh boy, that hit home kind of book. I think that's probably the biggest kind of similarity in terms of character-driven stuff. I feel emotionally wrung out, and I mean that in a positive sense. That's really where I'm at right now. I think it's fantastic. My overwhelming feeling right now is I'm so excited for more people to read this, and I'm currently messaging a few people who I know have read it already because I want to talk to people about it. That's my other recommendation, is find a friend to read this with, because you will want the emotional support. You really will. Oh, it's so good. I'm not going to spoil any of it, but it's so good. What I'm going to do is I'm going to finish my working day, because I really ought to, and I'm going to formulate some thoughts and pop them into a review, a very short kind of review of the series that I will pop at the end of this video for those who haven't wanted to hear not even in-depth thoughts. I don't think I've talked about this particularly in depth, but who don't want, just Judith in the moment responses, but would like, future Judith's reasoned thoughts and feelings. Maybe it'll probably still just be me screaming. I don't know what to tell you. I will see you in that next clip, where I will hopefully look slightly less dishevelled. But who knows, it's winter. I could look like anything. Hello! Welcome to the end of the video, where I'm doing a summary of my thoughts on the series. It's been a couple of days, I've had some time to process, I've had some time to write some notes, and I'm ready to go. I'm going to try and summarise why I think you should read the entirety of this series without spoiling the entirety of this series. It's a tall order, but someone has to do it, and I'm that person. This is wonderful, character-driven fantasy that will baffle and delight you with its ability to make you turn on your opinions of characters from book 1 as far as book 3 goes, where you will shift and change your own allegiances as quickly as characters in this series do. If you want complicated character dynamics and character emotions, and just to really sink your teeth into what makes a character tick, this is a series for you. I've talked about it a fair bit in this vlog, but the narrative structure of this book, where it is essentially slice of life fantasy, but for these people for whom life is incredibly high stakes and terrifying, where there isn't exactly a clear beginning, middle, end, turning point, 3-act structure going on in any of these books, and yet it's still super compelling, and you just want to keep reading, and you want to know what happens, and you have absolutely no idea where the book's going to take you at any given moment. Oh, it's just fantastic. If you want to shake up your reading, if you feel like you've fallen into reading incredibly cliched things that are just feeling all much of a muchness, this might knock you out of that. This series is full of really interesting themes. I think it would make a really good book club book if I did make a wonderful book club book for Space Sirens, but if you did it as a full series read and could really dig into the themes and the ideas of upholding tradition versus bringing in new ideas, and the importance of clinging on to tradition even when tradition can seem kind of strange or even brutal in some ways. The traditions of the Greenbones in this series are intense and in some ways very against what we would deem I'm going to use civilized in the biggest inverted commas, because there's obviously a whole heap of classism and colonialism coming into that, but that also plays into the story, and in a fascinating way. What else have I talked about? Old versus new, the idea of legacy. The last book is called Jade Legacy, but the idea of what you leave behind and what you build for the future. Oh, fascinating. On top of the just cool action sequences and exciting character dynamic stuff, it's all very cool, and then there are these really deep things going on in the background and being explored that by the end of book 3 you can really sit down and just be like, wow, that happened. Some things to bear in mind why you might not want to pick this up, because I do want to acknowledge that I do know people who did not enjoy this series. For one, I know that somebody I know really didn't like it because he didn't like reading the Patriarchal Society, so this is one, and it doesn't really get that much less patriarchal. There are cool female characters doing cool things, but the actual society as a whole doesn't get that much change in it. So if that's something you aren't into reading, or you need to time it well with some other things, that's something to bear in mind. And the other thing, I think I've mentioned this earlier, but I'd be really interested in reading/hearing some reviews from disabled reviewers, just because I think I would love to know their thoughts on the representation of characters with disabilities across this series, particularly in this last book. I'd like to hear them. I didn't see anything that felt like a huge red flag, but obviously I'm not the best person to speak to that. And lastly, if you have come here because you read book 1, you weren't convinced by it, and you want to know if you should continue with the series, or indeed if you managed to get through book 1 and 2 not being super into it, book 3, you don't need to worry about it. It is much of the same. You are not suddenly going to turn in your opinion of these books, or you're probably not. I don't know you. You might be like that. If you don't like book 1, you can be pretty sure you're not going to like the rest of the series, in my opinion. You know yourself best. But contrary to that, if you love book 1, you will love the whole series. It is very, very consistent in that way. Some comparisons and other things you might want to read. I know I recommend this all the time, but the Bone Ship series, the Tied Child series, I should say, by R.J. Barker, has a lot, in my opinion, a lot of similar liking characters doing bad things in some ways, and really coming around on characters after 3 books of living with them and hating them at the beginning and coming around to them by the end. That kind of thing, I definitely draw parallels. They're not very similar in tone, but there are some similar things going on. I know a lot of people will compare this series to, why won't it come to my head, the Poppy War series. I don't think they're that similar. I think that's just kind of people clumping Asian authors together. Not great. I do think if you wanted to pick one that was most similar, I think it's just Dragon Republic is the one that feels most similar to this series to me. Phoenix Extravagant by Yoon Ha-lee for some interesting government politicsy stuff. I think that also just for the exploitation of resources, I thought that would be really interesting to explore. Also a very good book club book in my opinion. Final thoughts, should you read this series? Absolutely yes, 100%. Please go and read them immediately, unless you didn't like the first one, in which case don't tell me about it. I don't want to know why you didn't like it, don't ruin it for me. Will that do? Is that enough? I expect this video has been a little bit long already because, you know, 3 quite hefty books and I had a lot to say. So hopefully you enjoyed watching this. Let me know what your thoughts are on the series down in the comments below. Be sure to keep things as spoiler free as possible. If you do want to talk spoilers, hop on over to my Discord where you can put spoiler tags on things. It's all linked down in the description below. While you're down there commenting, if you haven't already, please do subscribe. It makes me feel loved and appreciated, and there's more content coming your way. Follow me on social media. I already talked about Discord. That's all from me, and I will see you in the next one. It's gonna be some bloopers now.
Oh, I've put a bookmark in for myself. How helpful.
We're about to be interrupted by a little dog who's just been out in the snow. Hi, how is the snow? I will reason my why. That's not a sentence. Oh, yeah. In frame. Throwing my phone on the floor.